Welcome back. Today's going to be my final Senate update map before we actually get some concrete voting results in less than 1 week's time in the midterms of November 2018. It's crazy, but by this time next week, we'll already know all the winners of these Senate races, more than likely, unless they go to an extended runoff recount, things such as that. And that's possible given how competitive a number of these results are likely to be. So in this video, I feel like there's 10 Senate matchups that are still very interesting, worth talking about, going into a little bit deeper of a dive, those being in the states of Nevada, Arizona, Montana, North Dakota, Texas, Missouri, Indiana, Tennessee, West Virginia, and Florida. And for the purposes of this video, I'm going to be filling things out based primarily on the polling data, but specifically the classic model over from 538. They do a great job. It's my favorite model. They do polls, but on top of that, they also add in things like past voting in the state, historical trends, fundraising, and a bunch of other interesting categories to give their final analytical approach to who's going to go on and potentially win these matchups. A great resource. I'll link them down in the video description. So this video, it's not going to be my personal predictions. I already made that video a little over a month ago, and I'm still locked in with those predictions. So I'll also post that video down in the video description if you want to check out my own personal prediction. After we get the results, I'm going to go back and see how either accurate or inaccurate my predictions were. And then also, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the polls looked in terms of the numbers based on the actual vote that we get on election day. So going to be a lot of fascinating and interesting videos to come after the elections are over. So starting off here, I'm going to work my way from the west out east. So that means Nevada is going to be first up to talk about. And over at 538, they have Jacky Rosen's chances at 4-9, incumbent Republican Dean Heller at 5-9. And I have to say, if the Democrats lose this Senate race in the state of Nevada, it's going to be a big blow for them because this is the only Republican seat where it comes in a state that Hillary Clinton defeated Donald Trump, that they're going to be trying to get out of incumbent Republican hands. If they fall short in this one, that means that they're likely going to come up short in maybe a lot of these other races where perhaps they have the incumbency advantage, but it was in states where Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton. In some of these states, he did so by rather significant margins. The Democrats, they've had their eye on this Senate seat for a long time, and if they weren't able to get it in an election cycle that's looking very favorable for them, it would be a big blow for the party as a whole. So going down and looking at some of the recent polling data, what I love about 538, they're a great aggregator of different polling data from all different sources, and then they'll give you a ranking and a weight for these different sources based on the historical results and how accurate or inaccurate they've been. You can see here the weight that they give to the specific polls. Part of that weight is recency, and then also it's the credibility of the polling outlet that they're getting that data from. So the most recent poll from CNN has Rosen up by 3 points, and the data more recently has been looking a little bit better from Rosen than what we were seeing a little bit earlier in the month when we look back. In the polling data right now, the weighted average is a slight lean for the incumbent Dean Heller. And one thing that's really important to note about these races, if the polling is very close, within about 5 points or so, I'd say, that means that the race is very much up for grabs on both sides. If the Democrats have very strong turnout, they can potentially overcome a deficit in the polls, and then the vice versa is the same with the Republicans. If they're slightly down in the polls and they have stronger than expected turnout, then they could also pick up these upsets as well. So just because the polls say one thing, that doesn't mean those are going to be the people that actually go out and cast a ballot on election day. So that's something to keep in mind. So based on this one, it's extremely close, almost at about a coin flip, but still 538 has a slight lead for the Republicans, so we're going to fill that one out red here. And again, if the Democrats lost Nevada, it'd probably be their biggest disappointment out of any of these Senate races, even though they aren't in the incumbency advantage. So now we're going to move over to Arizona, where we have Martha McSally taking on Krysten Sinema. No incumbency advantage on either side. So we're going to go back to 538. Again, an extremely competitive race right now. They give the Democrats a 3-5 chance, the Republicans a 2-5 chance. Jeff Flake not running for re-election here, so the Republicans don't have that incumbency advantage. And Sinema, in general, has consistently been ahead in the polls. This is going back several months. We'll go down and see how things are looking more recently. And again, the polling data has been pretty close. It's actually been getting a bit closer as we've gotten closer to Election Day. And I think this is maybe because more so a state like Arizona is still a bit lean Republican. And as we get closer to an election day, those undecided voters in the polls tend to go back to what they're comfortable with, and that's probably having an effect in getting McSally a bit closer. But still, when you go down to the weighted average, it has the Democrats up by 1.6 points. But again, very close, as you can see with these recent polling results that we've been getting in this Arizona race. But it is leaning to the Democrats right now, so that's how we'll fill it out over on our map. Now we're going to move up to the state of Montana. And the Democrats have the incumbency advantage with Jon Tester, and the polling data has consistently been looking pretty solid for Tester. The big thing here in a state like Montana that Donald Trump was able to so significantly beat Hillary Clinton, that means that this was certainly a Democratic Senate seat that the Republicans have been having their eyes on. Right now, 538's classic model has Tester at a 6 in 7 chance, so it's looking pretty good for him. We go down and take a look at the polling data, and as you can see, Tester consistently ahead in these results. When we continue to go back, we actually don't see his Republican challenger ahead in any of the more recent polls that have been taken over the last few months. And then his weighted average, he's ahead Tester by 5.6 points. So this one looking pretty good for the Democrats to keep it. Wouldn't be a complete shock if the Democrats lost this one, given the Republican lean of the state overall. But again, looking pretty good for the incumbent Jon Tester. Now we're going to move one state over to North Dakota, where we have another incumbent Democrat here with Heidi Heitkamp, but things aren't looking as good for Heitkamp as they are for Tester. Heitkamp's approval, not quite what Tester's is, and Heitkamp not doing nearly as well in the polls. I'm actually surprised that 538 even has Heitkamp at a 1 in 4 shot, because when we look at the polling data, she's just consistently down by so much. The fact that she's actually giving somewhat of a chance here is the fundamentals based on her incumbency advantage, also just the national landscape as a whole. And also, I looked back at her 2012 race. She was actually consistently down in that polling as well before pulling off that upset victory. But she was a little bit closer in those polls than what we've been seeing in this matchup. So we'll take a look at that polling data. And as you can see here, consistently down by rather significant margins. The weighted average down by 9.2 points. That's a tough hill to climb for an incumbent here. And you can see those fundamentals being the main reason why she's still in this race at the end of the day. But giving this one certainly over to the Republicans and Kramer with how solid he's been looking in that polling data. We'll see how that plays out on Election Day. So moving back over and filling that one out for the Republicans. Now moving down to what I think is one of the more interesting Senate races on the board, that being in the state of Texas. You wouldn't normally expect to see a Senate race in Texas to be close, but Cruz, relatively weak approval ratings in his home state. They have been getting a bit better over the last couple months, which has also translated to some decent polling numbers, but still not the kind of polling numbers you'd like to see from an incumbent Republican in the state of Texas. Also, Beto O'Rourke, what he's been doing in terms of campaigning across the state, it's been very impressive. Also, his historic numbers of fundraising with those small dollar donors is also really giving an extra boost to his cause. So we'll take a look at that recent polling data. And in general, it's been pretty close. Consistently, Ted Cruz has been ahead by single digits, somewhat lower single digits in some of these results. The most recent poll, it was about a 3-point difference between O'Rourke and Cruz. On the higher end, the better polls with Cruz has him right around close to getting double digits, but in general, we're seeing him more, as we can see the average down here, at about a 5.4 point lead with that aggregate. Not an extremely comfortable lead here for the incumbent Ted Cruz, and if you get, for instance, an increase in Hispanic voter turnout in Texas, that can have a big potential swing for O'Rourke, given his dominance among that voter base, or just increase enthusiasm overall for the Democrats will at least give O'Rourke a fighting chance. We'll see how that plays out. Really looking forward to seeing how that race plays out. One of the more interesting contests on the board. So going to be filling that one out for the incumbent Ted Cruz. Now moving on over to the state of Missouri, where we have an incumbent for the Democrats, Claire McCaskill. A much tougher election for her this time around than what she faced 6 years ago against Todd Akin. her challenger, Republican Josh Hawley, hasn't made the kind of gaffes that Aiken did, and that's making this an extremely close race. You can see right now the classic model at 538 has the incumbent at a 3 in 5 chance for the Democrats. We'll go down to that polling data. And actually, the polling data has consistently shown a slight lean here for Hawley, but then when you take into House effects on top of this and some of the other adjustments, you can actually see the weighted average is slightly leaning to McCaskill. We'll see how this plays out. The fundamentals are in McCaskill's favor given her fundraising and also the national landscape. But Missouri, it was a state that heavily went for Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton. It is a Republican-leaning state, and that's why you have to think that Hawley has a decent shot at potentially picking this one off from an incumbent Democrat. But still right now, the numbers are suggesting that McCaskill has the slight edge here. We'll see how that plays out on Election Day. Definitely likely to be one of the closer matchups on the board. So now moving over one state, or actually a couple of states here, into the Midwest, continuing on with the trend here. An incumbent Democrat, Joe Donnelly, trying to hold on in a state in the Midwest here that is slightly leaning to the Republican side, and he's being taken on by Mike Braun. The numbers right now are giving Joe Donnelly a 7 in 10 chance, which isn't too bad. All of the different models are in his favor at this point. We see the most recent poll from Fox News is extremely encouraging for Donnelly, had him up by 7 points. You got to like that if you're Donnelly. You can see if we go back a little bit further, kind of a mixed bag with these polling results. Some have Donnelly ahead, some have Braun ahead. The weighted average overall down here at the bottom has almost about a 3-point lead here for Donnelly. Again, another one of those races that we're going to be keeping our eye on to see how this one plays out with an incumbent Democrat holding on for their lives in a Republican-leaning state. So we're going to be giving this one slightly over to the Democrats and incumbent Joe Donnelly. Now we're going to move over to the state of Tennessee. And no incumbency advantage here for the Republicans. Corker moving on and Blackburn taking over or trying to take over this Senate seat for the Republicans. And then you have the Democrat moderate Phil Bredesen. I think actually that endorsement from Taylor Swift can be a boost for Bredesen and something that he really needed in terms of how he was fading in the polls consistently over the past few months. If you go way back, consistently, Bredesen was actually ahead of Blackburn, and I think a lot of that had to do with his name recognition. But as we've gotten closer to election date, Blackburn has been able to catch up in terms of that name recognition from the popular former governor of the state, the Democrat Bredesen. We'll see how that Swift endorsement plays out. Perhaps that's helped him in the polls a little bit more recently, but still, he's a little bit of a long shot here, given a 1 in 6 chance. Not completely out of the realm of possibility, but it's not looking easy, certainly, for Bredesen. You can see the recent polling results has had Blackburn consistently ahead. Occasionally, Bredesen has been able to keep things close in the polls, but by and large, he's been down by a bit of a margin, which has the overall weighted average for the Republican up by 5.6 points. We'll see how this one plays out on Election Day, but you're definitely going to be giving the lean here to the Republicans in what is a very Republican-leaning state in Tennessee. The fact that the Democrats even have a chance in Tennessee is a positive sign for them, and the national landscape overall, perhaps that's able to carry over into a state like Tennessee and get that Democratic enthusiasm out there to vote for Bredesen, or even the independents. Bredesen is probably going to be able to win that group of the electorate, but there's just so many Republicans in the state that it's going to be tough to overcome. All right, so we just have a couple of states left here that I want to talk about, and the Republicans are at 51 seats, the Democrats at 47. That already gives the Republicans a win here in the Senate if things played out how the map is currently showing. They only need to get to 50 seats overall to have the advantage because they have the vice presidential tiebreaker. So now we're going to move over to West Virginia, which is a state that Donald Trump, again, it's one of these states where Trump absolutely demolished Hillary Clinton, and there's an incumbent Democrat here with Joe Manchin. Right now, looking pretty good for Manchin. He's given a 7 in 8 chance to keep this seat, being challenged by Republican Patrick Morrisey. And Manchin pretty consistently has been doing quite well in the polls, as you can see here. with that polling data. His weighted average, he's up by 7.6 points. And then also in terms of the fundamentals, fundraising, the national landscape, it's all looking very strong for Joe Manchin to keep this seat in West Virginia. Also, he's gotten some very key endorsements in West Virginia as well. That's helped boost his cause. It would be somewhat of a surprise if Manchin wasn't able to hold on to this one, even though West Virginia went heavily for Trump and Trump is doing what he can to try to get Manchin out of there. I think Manchin's able to overcome that opposition from Trump and his party and keep this one for the Democrats. And that's what the polling data is also suggesting there in the state of West Virginia. And then one more state to go over. Again, this is another one that might be one of the closest races likely to be so, and that's down in the state of Florida. Nelson, his chances have been actually getting quite a bit better more recently, and I think that Gillum in the governor's race is going to have a very strong positive impact on a down ballot case here with Bill Nelson. Gillum's going to turn out a lot of voters that might not have otherwise turned out in the midterm elections, these Democratic voters that are likely also going to be voting for Bill Nelson, and that might carry him over the line. Not necessarily the most enthusiastic campaigner by any means, and that's putting it mildly, but the polling data for Nelson has been looking better more recently. You can see here he's consistently ahead, but it's by slight margins. Not a big surprise to see all of these very close polling results in a state like Florida, where it seems like we almost always get extremely close races when there's a lot of national attention on them. You see this weighted average here for Nelson. He's up by 3 points. Not an easy opponent for him to go against, though. The current governor of the state, Republican Rick Scott, who actually has a decent favorability rating within the state. Bill Nelson, not going to be easy, certainly, especially when you add on the fact that Rick Scott has pumped so much of his own wealth into his campaign to try to get him over the line. We'll see how it plays out. Going to be a very interesting result there, again, in the state of Florida, but giving that one as a lean over to the Democrats and Bill Nelson. So at the end of the day, 538, their map would have it at about 49 for the Democrats, 51 for the Republicans. And that's actually where we currently stand with the Senate before the midterms even get here. But again, the fact that the Democrats are defending 26 seats, the Republicans just 9, if they can hold and keep it at 49, that would be a positive for them, certainly, when you're just taking a holistic look at the map and how it's very tough for them to not lose any seats or lose the aggregate. So we'll see how this plays out on Election Day. Can't wait. Hope you guys come back here after the election results so I can go back and take a look at my personal prediction videos, see how either accurate or inaccurate I was. Again, I'll link my final prediction of the Senate map down in the video description if you're interested in what I have to say about these races instead of just looking at the analytical numbers of it. Hope to see you in that video and also after the fact when we get those final results. So thanks guys for stopping on in. Subscribe for more. Hope to see you back here for those future videos.